Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idol, and you know how it feels like Disney and Star Wars and Marvel has been kind of whipping it out and peeing all over their fan base? Well, that happened quite literally on Friday Night Tights, if you guys hadn't heard already. Gavin McInnes, who's known for being an infamous conservative troll, and just dump all over fandom and everything that a lot of people love, have made careers out of, have gotten very passionate hobbies based around, and then the infamous whipping out a fake, member, we should say, and, deciding to pee all over the camera before he was kicked from the show. Now, obviously, this was quite divisive for fans of Geeks and Gamers, Nerdrotic, Friday Night Tights, the whole nine, because there's a lot up in the air. Was this a good show? Was this a bad show? Was this too much? And I actually think that there's a lot of nuance that's being lost in a situation like this, with people taking hard stances one way or the other. And I think there's actually some middle ground that we should take a look at and find when it comes to issues like this, if you even want to call them issues. I've got a pretty, at least in my opinion, unique take that I haven't really seen a lot of on Twitter. Again, there's been a lot of just hard stances one way or the other. But let's go through this. I'm going to give you guys my views while also showing you what was said and what was done for context, minus the very end, which I, for obvious reasons, cannot show you. And yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, that'll.
Hey, Gavin, what's your favorite video game?
I like Joust.
Joust.
Oh shit.
Okay.
Joust.
Okay.
That's about the last
Yeah, I
one.
haven't played video games since I was a child because video games are for children.
And here we see our first issue. These are his first words on the entire episode, minus him saying okay at one point. Now, it's very easy to dismiss this as him just being comedic and whatnot, doing some ball busting just like the FNT crew does. Because, I mean, anyone that watches the show knows that they just sit around, and while they do give, their news and views and takes on pop culture, there's a lot of ball busting going on. It's like being in the back of the bus in 6th grade and just chilling with your friends. It's usually an all-around great time. That being said, there's an inherent sincerity that is coming with McGinnis' take that you will see more of as the show goes on. Obviously, I'm not going to watch the full thing, but I'm going to give you some highlights. But here's the problem. When you come on a show like this and you've got an alternate viewpoint, Gavin McGinnis is very famously anti-nerd, anti-pop culture, things like that, you should at least be going in with good faith. So he is not, it seems, willing to, compromise, meet in the middle, because out the gate, he's being antagonistic towards not only the crew that is, and the cast that has him on the show, and that invited him, or he actually said he wanted to come on. They said, yeah, if, for what I heard is correct. He's not going in with good faith. He just wants to come in for unknown reasons. I'm not sure what Gavin McInnes thought that he could get out of this, but aside from maybe do his comedy shtick, if you want to call it that. But when you're not going in with good faith, then a conversation can't really be had. Now, you will see later on, Jeremy, Shad, Ryan, Gary, all of them do want to have a serious conversation, because it is actually a very good conversation to have. I actually, spoiler alert, I really liked this episode. Did not like a lot of the takes from certain individuals on this episode, but it is an important conversation to be had. And I think that the problem with bringing in somebody who is not, good faith is that you can have important discussions between people who disagree as long as both individuals are willing to have those conversations honestly and come in and be willing to give a back and forth, as opposed to, and be open to the idea that their mind can be changed, as opposed to just sticking, to their guns, digging their heels in, and, all around, what's the point in being here if you're not actually going to try and have a productive, fruitful conversation? Instead, not only is he, disrespecting the cast and crew that's got him on the show, but all the viewers watching who are giving up their evenings, they're washing dishes while watching this, they're hanging out, doing whatnot, and then you've just got some guy on the show that you spend your Friday nights watching who's dumping all over also you, the viewer, which you're effectively the paying customer, especially if you send super chats or have a membership or anything like that. It's not a pleasant experience for the viewer, but I don't think it always should be a pleasant experience, because the discomfort that comes from how disrespectful Gavin McGinnis is, I actually think is important when it comes to keeping us out of any sort of echo chamber. We can watch Friday Night Tights every Friday and all agree about everything all the time. I'm sorry, that's no different than the echo chambers that they talk about that the left has, where everyone agrees that, oh, your characters need to be trans and bi, and you need to race swap. Like, they talk all the time about how the left puts people, they have their echo chambers when it comes to pop culture. And it's actually good to not cultivate that if you're trying to give a counterculture movement. So having Gavin McInnes on, knowing that this is what he was going to do, I actually think was brilliant. Let's continue.
See, I think this whole trans thing may have started with video games where someone plays as a chick for 6 hours, and the next thing you know, they're a chick. Like, what was that video game you were playing, Ryan, where you...
And here we have another weird little take. Again, not entirely sure if he's being accurate, if this is truly his beliefs, or if he is just being comedic at this point. And that is part of the problem, looping back to the good faith thing I said from earlier. If you're not going to be good faith, why? I get coming in trying to be funny, but by the same token, a conversation is also attempted to be had. So if you do need to be able to draw the line between when you're being serious and when you're just doing things for the lulz, which I think he actually does a bit better later on. But it's such a strange thing to say, playing as, females in video games is what leads to the trans stuff. Full disclosure, I play World of Warcraft. I love playing World of Warcraft. I've turned into quite the World of Warcraft fan since I got into it about 3 months ago. I absolutely play as a female, because when I'm running around this giant open world and killing monsters and whatnot, sorry, it's nicer to look at a female figure. It really is. I've never at any point had any sort of inclination to go on and chop my bottom parts off and start calling myself Stacy. It just ain't gonna happen. I just like looking at curves while I'm killing orcs as opposed to looking at rippling shoulders. I guess that just doesn't do it for me.
I don't like what's happening to children's books. That doesn't mean I want adults reading children's books. So I care about children's books just like I care about Spider-Man. But they're both for kids.
Yeah, and I think that dismissiveness is what's led to a lot of conservatives failing in the culture war, to be honest with you.
And there it is. Ryan Kinnell hits the nail on the head. That sort of dismissiveness that any sort of fandom, nerdy property, whatnot. Look, Spider-Man, is it for kids? Absolutely. Is it also for adults? Yeah, also absolutely. Now, should you trust an adult male who's like 34 years old going to bed in Spider-Man pajamas every night? No, you shouldn't trust me. Alright, jokes aside, there's obviously such a thing as too far. You should never let any sort of fandom consume you, make it, the entirety of your being. Whether it be nerdy, whether it be sports, whether it be, makeup if you're a female, or I guess some certain types of males. Point is, getting overly obsessed with anything, not good. But by the same token, these sorts of stories, these literary stories, and yes, comic books can be considered literary stories because they have very, roots in the great, character archetypes, Greek mythologies, the hero's journey, everything like that. When you've got a story out there that's message is, with great power comes great responsibility, such as Spider-Man, why should that be a story and, more importantly, a message exclusively for children? That's the sort of thing that is a good message regardless of age. With great power comes great responsibility. That's just good words to live by. It's a good rule of thumb about personal responsibility. The same sort of thing that Jordan Peterson talks about all the time, that Gavin McInnes is a fan of, has worked with, has talked about. He's a big Jordan Peterson guy who openly talks about all the time how important these classic stories are. But instead of, because these weren't written, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, because they're put out now with people who have capes instead of togas, he's dismissive of them. And it's not a good look. It's something that, look, I'm not conservative. I've told you guys a million times. I'm not conservative. I'm not liberal. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm a very down-the-middle individual that does my stuff, does my voting on a case-by-case basis. And I vote in every single local election. I think the voting is incredibly important. And you know what? Sometimes I'm ticking the box that says D, and sometimes I'm ticking the box that says R, because I like to look at local policies. I like to realize, okay, what is good here? What is good there? And it just sort of depends. FNT did a very good job tonight of illustrating to individuals that the left, they've understood the power that culture has, specifically pop culture has, and they've done a whole lot of infiltrating that pop culture, changing it, bending it to the way they want to think, whereas a lot of the right thinks that, oh, this is all kid stuff. Anyone that enjoys this, if they're above a certain age, they're man children, they probably automatically assume those sort of, adults are on the left because no, righteous, regular Republican, AR-15 holding, individual would be into that sort of stuff. Man, I actually watched this episode of FNT with my grandmother, and she thought Gavin was a moron. Let me tell you, when a 73-year-old woman is watching all these clowns with all this swearing and talking about Lord of the Rings and superheroes, and the one she thinks is a moron was Gavin McGinnis, I was actually pretty floored. But the point is, I think we're gonna stop here with the clips and whatnot, unless there's anything else that I can think of off the top of my head that I want to show you. But I think this illustrates a good point about his dismissiveness towards nerd culture. What I want to really get to is the reaction to the fans on Twitter, because again, it was very divisive, and I think that both fans on either side are absolutely missing the root of why this was a good and fruitful episode. So we see a tweet right here. Family enjoys FNT, but that was not cool. My 13-year-old doesn't need to see that. We don't need Disney level of crass on FNT, bad form. This is an idiot take. I was almost convinced for a while that this was a troll take, but it's not. Look, all the people that watch FNT, myself included, are the same type of people that are saying drag shows probably shouldn't be in, elementary schools. It's just not a thing that elementary schools should have going on. So when you're telling me that your family enjoys FNT, FNT is an R-rated show. If you truly want to talk about how, my kids shouldn't be subject to all this bad, negative sexual stuff, this sort of stuff's always on FNT. Sure, there's not always, someone whipping out a fake dick. But the conversations that are being had, the stuff they're talking about, is the stuff that you don't want your children seeing in schools. So your kid, if you ever want your kids to see that stuff in school, they shouldn't be watching FNT either. I don't get how you can say your family enjoys FNT and then we don't need Disney level of crass in FNT. FNT is far more crass than Disney. Disney is ideologically bankrupt. They are morally disgusting, but they're not crass. That's just a poor choice of words. FNT is absolutely crass. That's, why we love it. That's also why, it's for adults. I mean, the amount of F-bombs, the amount of racist jokes, the amount of, digging at certain political issues. We all know it's in good fun, and that good fun gets a broader message across about, the sort of pop culture and where we're at in the world and things to that effect. But I'm sorry, if your 13-year-old is watching FNT, then they've already seen and done far worse than Gavin McGinnis whipping out a fake dick. And this is just a genuinely incomprehensible tweet. It's actually fascinating that someone could be this dumb and yet be part of the fellowship. So, good job, don't mind me, just curious. You're a moron. We have another person here with the same sentiment. What on God's green earth happened? If I'm gathering this right, I'm glad I was listening an hour or so behind rather than watching with the family. Why would you be watching FNT with your family? It is clearly an R-rated comedy show. This is not something that kids... I mean, if you're a parent, do what you want. You can let your kids watch whatever you want to let them watch, and that's totally up for you to decide. But if you're going to let your kids watch FNT, then you probably shouldn't give a damn if they're, also watching some of the Disney stuff that has all the gay agenda crap that you're always screaming about. If you're going to pick a side, you should be philosophically consistent with your side. However, we also get comments like this, and comments like this are also just as idiotic in my opinion. Gavin isn't right in the head. He trashed Lord of the Rings, which was enough proof for me, because I tuned out after the first hour. Now, this person says tuned out, which leads me to believe they at least had it on, they just tuned it out, which, sure, I still think that's dumb, because here's the thing. You might not like Gavin. You might disagree with Gavin. I don't really like Gavin. I quite frankly disagree with Gavin. He said one thing that entire stream that I agree with. Only one, and that was about how hard you should work to keep a marriage together and not give up on it. A 4-hour podcast, 3 hours of which he was on before they booted him, and he said one thing I agree with. Don't exactly care for the dude. That being said, if you're tuning out of this podcast because a guy is on that you don't like, when a debate is happening and other people are piling on saying, you've got Jeremy, you've got Ryan, you've got Shad, you've got Gary, all who are combating his opinion, you should be listening to this. At that point, you're falling into the same sort of echo chamber that you claim the left has, and that you want to claim that you're the free thinkers and this, that, and the other. But then why are you tuning out if someone you disagree with is on the show? When a debate and a discussion is being had, it doesn't make any sort of sense to me. And you're going to see several comments where people say they flat out turned it off. They didn't watch it. To me, that is, if any episode of FNT should be watched, if you're familiar with FNT. If you're not familiar with FNT, no, this is not the first episode you should watch. But if you've seen 3, 4, 5 episodes of FNT, and he's had Critical Drinker on, he's had Disparu on, he's had It's a Gundam on, all these individuals who are, very much in the same line of thinking as, the nerdrotic crew and the Geeks and Gamers crew, but maybe have a few differences of opinion here and there. If you've seen 4 or 5 of those, this should be a must-watch, because getting people on that you disagree with and having a, for the most part, calm, rational discussion and disagreements and trying to find common ground is incredibly important. Now, not even an attempt at common ground was made on the part of Gavin McInnes. He thought it would be more funny to talk about how Lord of the Rings was infantile but then fart into his microphone. Sure, that's great. But the intent from the Nerdrotic crew was there to preach this message about how these sorts of stories and fandoms are incredibly important to culture, and you should actively be watching when someone who disagrees with you and your principles responds to the sort of criticisms that the Nerdrotic crew was giving Gavin McInnes. If you tuned out, you're missing the point of what you claim you're a fan of, because Friday Night Tights is their whole point is to get out this message that this sort of stuff is important. And when they get someone on the show who doesn't think it's important, he's their target audience. He's the people they're trying to preach to. You should probably see if they are effective at conveying that message. If they're not, what should be changed? What should be done? What would be other ways of conveying the message? Are there any more convincing opportunities? So we're going to see a bunch of comments where they talk about how they turned it off, and that completely misses the point of the show they claim to love. He should have gotten booted about an hour before that anyway. Such a waste of a show. He's a complete tool. Please, Gary, learn this lesson. Don't invite guests on just to be controversial. No, you're the tool, Stephen Lee. Again, I don't like Gavin McInnes. I did not like him on this show, and that's what made it a good... Now, should this be FNT all the time? No, absolutely not. This is a, let's say, a once every, 4 months sort of thing for my palate. It'd be like, every 16 episodes. But you should bring people on to be controversial, because... I'm sorry, otherwise you're in your own echo chamber. FNT would just be an echo chamber. I love FNT, but how many times can you hear the same people talk about how, they race swapped this character, this character's trans now, Hollywood just did this again. Like, it's the same thing over and over, but with new coats of race swapped paint is really what it is. So you should invite these sort of people on. If Gary announced tomorrow that next week's FNT guest was Anita Sarkeesian, dude, I'd be so looking forward to that episode, because it would be an awesome discussion. It would probably not be fruitful in the slightest, but it would at least be great to see how that attempt is made. If they said tomorrow that their next guest was going to be Tim Pool, after all that stuff that Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers had done to clown Tim Pool, I think that controversy would be great, because, and in fact, I think that'd be a great episode, because then, Tim, I believe, would actually keep a level head, and there could be conversation and whatnot, especially since Gary has been on Tim's show before. My point is, having guests to be on just to be controversial is a good thing, as long as there's good faith on both sides. Now, there was not good faith, once again, on Gavin's side, but that is not the fault of FNT. So, once you are like the previous person I was speaking about, you have got the wrong idea, and you are just cool living in this echo chamber. I don't know why people would be okay with being in an echo chamber. You want diversity of thought. Is that not what we always try and preach? We're so sick of forced diversity because swapping someone's skin color, swapping a character's skin color is forced diversity. The real diversity is diversity of thought. That's what we always claim. Yet here they are. They bring on somebody who has diversity of thought, and now everyone's throwing a fit. But at the end of the day, I think people are missing the point of why this was an incredibly important live stream, and it's to get the message out there that this is not all about the left. FNT is not just some Trump-loving Republican, let's hate on everything Democrat sort of institution. No, this is about making sure fandom can grow and to stop the attack on fandom, whether it be from the inside, like the left is doing, or dismissively from the outside, like the right is doing. Because nerds are a big group of voters. They really are. Nerd is a demographic now. You walk into the mall, you can go to just the girliest store you can imagine, Limited 2 or whatever. They're gonna have some pink MCU socks. Nerd is a demographic. That's why titty streamers playing Fortnite or whatever is a thing. So If they're a demographic of buyers, they're also a demographic of voters. And the sooner the right realizes this, maybe the more better off things will get for them. And because the left has already realized this. Now, whether you're left or right, don't know, don't care. My point is, the goal of FNT is to educate people in a very comedic fashion about the rights and wrongs of the modern state of pop culture. And idiots like Gavin McGinnis absolutely just dismissing it as worthless, infantile children's stuff is a problem. But the solution is what FNT did. Bring them on the channel, talk to them, hopefully educate them, and even if nothing gets through to them, maybe something will get through to one of their listeners. I'm sure there were some Gavin McInnes fans in the chat that night. They were watching the show because they'd never seen it before, and they were just watching it because Gavin was on it. And even if just one of them thought, man, I never thought about it before. Maybe Lord of the Rings isn't actually something just for 13-year-olds. If one person took that away, I would call the show a success. But that's just my opinion. Let me know yours in the comments below, or you can let me know on Twitter, where you can find me at BoltTheWord. And please do like, comment, subscribe, the whole nine, especially that subscription. Just made it above 500 subs, sitting around 530-ish, and I've not quite been doing this for 3 months, so that's huge for me. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. I appreciate everything you guys have done. Let's see if we can get that number higher. I am a nerdy news channel. I cover nerdy news every day, whether it be things like this, sort of nerdy YouTube stuff, but that's not the main of it. Mostly things like Magic the Gathering, anime, Star Wars, you name it. It's all here in the nerdosphere, and this has been Words of Paradise.